Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. And if you're watching this recorded video later on, thanks for tuning in. My name's Raiza, and today I'm going to be talking about what it means to me to be a productive product manager, especially in this remote climate. I'm going to be talking about what productivity looks like in this new normal that we're in, and how to set up goals that empower you and make you feel good about getting the job done, and how you can influence teams and people even when we're not seeing each other in real life. If you're new to remote work, possibly struggling with a change, and really who isn't, or looking for some tips to be more effective in your role, you could benefit from this webinar. So a little bit about me. As I said, my name's Raiza. You can find links to my LinkedIn, website, and Instagram on the slides if you want to connect or hit me up with any questions. Currently, I'm a product manager at Google, but previously I've only ever worked at startups, including my own, which was an Amazon business. Outside of work, I have 2 kids, a puppy, and many plants that I care for. So it's become insanely important for me to balance wellness, productivity, and positivity. I feel the pains of remote work because several years ago, I actually worked fully remote and I hated it. It was super difficult for many reasons, including the fact that I was unprepared, undisciplined, and not realistic about how I approached my role in remote work. So today, I'm here to help you not make my same mistakes and possibly even enjoy your job more despite these sudden changes to our work environment. But before we jump into tips and solutions, let's talk a little bit about the problem. What are we even talking about here? So you've seen these headlines, right? And if you haven't, the links are in the slides. But somehow, not only are we dealing with the realities of a pandemic upon us, record unemployment, and an upcoming election, we're also now on average working 3 hours longer than we did pre-COVID. Now, before I go to the next slide, let me ask you, is that you? Does this ring a bell? Why do you think that is? This new normal that we're in is unprecedented. This isn't just about work anymore. It's a convergence of all the things that I mentioned, plus work, and we're in the middle of it all. So of course, it's only natural that we feel like we're not doing enough in our roles to get things done. And if I'm right about you, I know that product managers are insane achievers, perfectionists, and your desire to get things done is off the charts. So especially now, it can feel like we really have to pull our weight as we see layoffs and unemployment happen around us. On top of all of this, it's become pretty difficult to measure objectively whether or not we're being productive. Beating myself up for not getting things done or feeling like I could have done more when it was absolutely unreasonable to have that expectation. It can lead to a debilitating spiral of negativity that not only feels terrible, but affects how you approach work on a daily basis. So here's a quick tip to crush that negative mindset in its tracks. Ask yourself this question: what is the job of a remote product manager anyway? I'll tell you, it's not different from your job as a day-to-day, effective, sometimes in the office PM. You are here to bring the team together to ship incredible products. When you look at your calendar and what you have lined up for the day, use this simple filter. Are you bringing the team together with this meeting or this doc or this presentation that you're working on? Or is it something that gets you closer to shipping your incredible product? Because if not, you're going to have to cut that down. Your job as a PM is to be laser focused on the outcomes of your team and yourself in both the macro and micro sense of both. And to that end, I give you this tip. Be ruthless, but be kind, especially to yourself. You get to set the terms of your own productivity. It means that you determine what the victory conditions are, because that's what it means to have a healthy relationship with your time. Don't let things deter you from your focus, and not just from work-related tasks, but also your free time. Guard your free time just like you would with a key deliverable at work. because it's this balance that keeps you going and will help you persevere through mental and emotional hardship. And finally, be real. I know that you are going to set that bar attainably high, but you also need to do the work to identify what it will take to get there and make sure that you are bringing along your stakeholders along on the journey. Which brings me to my next point. Let's think about a framework for how we approach our goals and how we plan to exceed them. Setting goals is a future guessing exercise. Where do you want to be in a year or by the end of the year? What does that success look like? In the simplest example ever, let's pretend your goal is to help your team sell $1,000 worth of product in 2020. That means that when we break that down by halves and quarters and months and weeks and days, while it can seem like a tedious exercise, the goal is to come up with a clear, measurable milestone that helps to keep us on track. In the example where we're aiming to sell $1,000 worth of product by the end of the year, we can break down these milestones in terms of meeting the $500 mark by mid-year or $250 by quarter. Now, remember that this is also a highly iterative and collaborative process that needs your manager or CEO and, of course, your team to be on board ahead of time. Consider this your contract or agreement for what your charter is. This is what will keep not just you, but your entire team focused on these goals and will help reduce the bloat that normally contributes to us working 3 or more hours a day than we ordinarily would. All right. So let's talk about some practical tips to make sure we're able to translate this into real life. There are 3 key parts to setting goals and making sure that we meet them. First, we want to make sure that everyone is bought into the model. Maybe it's the model that I shared in the last few slides, but maybe it's different. Regardless of what approach you're taking, you want to make sure your team is bought into this model and that everyone can see the biggest and smallest picture possible at all times. As the PM, you're 50% an artist, painting the vision and getting everyone excited about the future you're building. But you're also 50% a scientist and the most tactical of the bunch, always helping the team to find the correct combination of detailed work that will get us to launching an incredible product. Second, keep everyone accountable and aligned, including yourself. If we have a big vision, it means that each person on the team is accountable for a chunk of that work that it takes to deliver on this promise. You want to make sure that each person knows what work they're responsible for, why, and that progress is clear across the board. And finally, possibly the most important one, is to celebrate wins. When we have real milestones, it's easier to know when you've hit them. And when you do, take the time to recognize that. Pause, celebrate your team, and honestly, if it took a heroic effort to get there, especially in this remote climate, give that individual praise. It's even more important than ever to build this positive impact. Let's talk about how we can help get everyone bought into the model. The easiest way is to share a battle-tested model. Whether that's in the form of epics or OKRs, it's easier to start the conversation when there are case studies and research to support your proposal. From here, have a direct conversation with your team about before and after scenarios. But keep in mind that this isn't about telling your team about what's wrong and pointing out everything on your own. Think about taking the approach of asking your team for feedback first. Ask these questions. What do you think could be better about our process? Or what do you think we're currently struggling with as a team? Typically, if your team is struggling from overwork or feeling stressed out, you could have everybody chiming in. Or you have the opposite. Nobody says anything and they're just waiting for that first person to volunteer themselves. This is a great opportunity to use your emotional intelligence to help move the conversation along. Don't let it stall. If you think it might work better with your team to have a presentation ahead of time, use it. Lead the charge by building an environment of trust that is focused on outcomes and not just griping. And make sure that each step of the way, you're doing it as a team. Once you have a sense of what isn't working well, think about what model can work well for improving the sentiments. I can tell you just from my experience that clear stories or OKRs can really improve feelings of low morale. The clearer you are with your expectations from each other and from your product, the better you will be able to balance work and how we all feel about success. Second, I call this practice staying aligned. For a PM especially, you want to make sure you are bringing your team along on the journey. This means something as simple as a daily stand-up, taking 5 to 10 minutes a day to state what progress we're making as individuals to meet the milestones we've set. Once we've agreed on our goals, we want to keep everyone accountable, not just so we can call them out, but so we can identify if we need help. This isn't an exercise just to make sure that we're meeting the goals. It's also about being realistic when we see that it's just not possible to do so, especially today. The best organizations know when things aren't working, and they pivot quickly to re-strategize, and they make that work for them. And finally, celebrate your wins. This isn't necessarily having a Zoom party or just about hitting milestones, right? It's about recognizing effort. Wins aren't just tied to deliverables. They're also tied to boosting morale. When you see a member of your team undertaking efforts to get to your goal, recognize that. It can be as simple as a ping or quick email to say, hey, I see you. Let me know if I can help, but it looks like you've got a great handle on this. Also, wins don't just mean you're helping to get the team unblocked. I sometimes think we don't get enough credit for blocking for the right reasons. Sharing positive feedback like, hey, you came up with a great argument for why we shouldn't build the feature this way or why we shouldn't launch this quarter. And I think that really helped us avoid a ton of negative feedback from our users. This can really bring into perspective a person's impact on your team. Okay, on our final topic, some tips on how to build your remote sphere of influence, especially when we're not in person. This is my personal favorite because I love meeting and hanging out with my team in person. It's the best part of my job and really the biggest reason why I joined Google. So here are my tips in the form of rules. Rule number 1, never underestimate the power of genuine human connection. Now, this isn't a rule for PMs as much as it is a rule that helps make life better no matter what your role. Especially during this pandemic, we're all going through something. Your engineers, your marketing team, your researchers, your designers, these are all real people who could benefit from you reaching out and checking in on them. When I said bring the team together earlier, this is it. If you are so inclined, schedule one-on-one coffee chats or virtual group coffees or lunches or game days, right? Where the rule is not to talk about work, but really to build solid connections. This is what it takes to really get to know the folks on your team and show that you're there for them. Rule number 2, ask with good reasons and ask nicely. More often than not, us PMs have to ask for something. Whether it's to tweak designs or make changes to help center articles, we're almost asking someone for something. And in these times, it's even more important to be clear about why we're asking. So state the benefit to the product, the team, and of course to your user. And then ask nicely, with a clear regard for the other person's time. This is also an opportunity to let your teammate state when they can deliver instead of demanding. And finally, rule number 3, take the time to understand and care about what your team cares about. Your team is not a monolithic entity. Your team is comprised of people of various interests, inclinations, aspirations, and goals. Your job as a PM is to inspire, aspire, and achieve. You can't do that if you don't know how to get everyone on board with your mission. And truly, the only way to get people to care about what you care about is to show them first that you can do the same. So take time to break down what's important to each role, first maybe on a generic level, and then spend the time learning about how each person views their role and their aspirations. Honestly, this rule is my favorite one because it applies not just to being a PM or even just to work, but really it applies to being a good friend and partner. And that's it. Thank you for joining me on this webinar, and I hope you got some useful tips. If you'd like to chat more, or if you want to send feedback, I would really appreciate it, especially about this webinar. Please feel free to reach out via LinkedIn, my website, or Instagram, which you'll find in my slides. Thanks again.